Good afternoon. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Business Housing Inspections and Zoning Committee for today, May 16th. I have been joined by all members of the committee. That includes Councilmember Chugtai, Ellison, Osman, Rainville, and Chavez, which are all members. I am going to start our meeting today by the consent agenda. Item 5 is the liquor license approvals, and 6 are the renewals. Item 7 is a legislative directive, and item 8 is a grant agreement for sprinkler installation at a number of public housing high-rises. Item number 9 are changes to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund program. I'm going to pull that item for discussion. Item 10 are updates to our QAP. 11 is a rezoning at 3410 42nd Street East. Item 12 is a land sale in our commercial land trust program. Sorry, item number 13 is a bond issuance at 620 Olson Memorial Highway. Item number 14 is setting a public hearing for changes to our mold ordinance. Item 15 is setting a public hearing with regard to administrative enforcement and the administrative hearing process. Other than item number 9, are there any items anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll move the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those items are approved. We'll now start with our public hearing agenda. We're going to have item number 9 moved to the end of the agenda, and then we will start with item number 1, which is snack bar. I'm sorry. Ms. Campagna, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
License Inspector Keisha Campagna with License and Consumer Services. I'm presenting an application for Snack Bar LLC, doing business as Snack Bar, located at 800 Washington Avenue North, Suite 101. The applicant is requesting a permanent expansion in the Sidewalk Cafe license. If approved, they will add 24 outdoor seats with no music or outdoor speakers. The Snack Bar has been operating at this location since 2020. Hours of operations are Tuesday through Thursday, 5 to 10 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 4:30 to 11 p.m. On April 21st, 81 public hearing notices were sent to property owners within 350 feet of the premises. Notices were also sent to the North Loop Neighborhood Association, the Warehouse District Business Association, and Councilmember Rainville. We have not received any comments from the community. A review of 311 calls and police calls found no significant issues related to this business. The License and Consumer Service Division recommends approval of permanent expansion of premises and Sidewalk Cafe for Snack Bar. This concludes my presentation. At this time, I'll stand by for any comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your report today. We'll see if there are any questions for you. I don't believe so. Thank you for being here. We'll open the public hearing on item number 1, which is a license for an expansion of premise and Sidewalk Cafe at 800 Washington Avenue. I see there is one person here to sign up. I'd welcome you to step forward now as I open the public hearing on item number 1. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Isaac Becker. I'm one of the owners and operators of Snack Bar, and I'm just here to be the face of our company and say that we're excited to open this patio space, and I think it'll be a prettier addition to that little stretch of Washington, and with planting and everything we plan on doing, I think it'll be a good addition.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here today, Mr. Becker.
All right.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Rainville.
Madam Chair, thank you. I would like to make a motion to approve item number 1. And Mr. Becker, I want to thank you for coming down today. Thank you for investing, and look forward to working with you. You know, as you can see, the new pedestrian crosswalks outside here. So I've been working with the North Loop Neighborhood Group on that, and we hope to slow down the traffic at that corner and beautify it. And we'll have to include you in the discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
On Councilmember Rainville's motion to approve, any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Thank you for taking time to come down, Mr. Becker. We'll move on to item number 2, which is the State of Minnesota's financial assistance for the Modular Innovation Solutions Project at 415 Royalston Avenue in the 5th Ward. I'll ask Ms. Moses to give her report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Judy Moses with CPED Business Development. Before you today is a request for a resolution of support for the city to submit an application to the state for the Minnesota Investment Fund loan to George Modular Innovation Solutions, LLC. The public hearing is part of the state's requirements for the MIF program, which provides funds to local governments who then pass the loan funds on to the business. There are other actions in the RCA that do not require the public hearing. George Modular Innovation Solutions is a new modular housing company with plans to locate in Minneapolis at 415 and 501 Royalston Avenue North. The company would produce steel modular units for on-site assembly of permanent multi-story housing. They plan to convert an existing 200,000 square foot warehouse into a manufacturing plant. The projected cost of the building improvements and equipment is approximately $19 million. The company aims to hire individuals primarily between the ages of 18 and 24 who are unemployed or underemployed, as well as dislocated workers who need retraining. They expect to hire 133 new full-time employees over the first 2 years. The average wage is expected to be $31 an hour plus benefits. And if approved by the state, the MIF loan would be partially forgivable if the company meets the hiring goals that are set by the state over the first 2-year period. The financial terms of the loan will be required by the program, and the loan could be up to $2 million. The loan is a business subsidy and is pursuant to state law, will require a business subsidy agreement requiring certain wage and job goals. The company also is seeking assistance from the state through their Job Creation Fund program. The JCF assistance would be awarded directly to the company from the state, contingent upon meeting job goals and capital investment. The state will determine the dollar amount of the JCF award. Staff requests authorization to submit the applications to the state, and if an award is made, to accept those funds and execute all related documents. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and we also have representatives from the company here as well.
Thank you, Ms. Moses. We'll see if there are any questions. Councilmember Ellison?
No questions so far.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Any questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for your report. We'll open the public hearing on item number 2, which is supporting the state of Minnesota's financial assistance to George Modular Innovative Solutions. I see we have 3 people signed up to speak. You know who you are, but we'll start with Mr. McConnell. Welcome, followed by Mr. English and Mr. Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council members, Dan McConnell, Minneapolis Building Trades. Just proud to be here today in support of this proposal and hope I can count on your support.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Mr. English?
Council Chair Goodman, it's a pleasure to be here today. This represents a dream that started May of 2019 when we started with a research project by the University of Minnesota that said ultimately a modular manufacturing was a new job sector that create jobs in so-called marginalized communities. The study was done by the Carlson School of Business, and today we have an opportunity to realize this. Thanks to the city of Minneapolis, and you in particular, Councilmember Goodman, of helping us. The city has given us a $2 million loan. This now means that the state is going to bring in an additional 2 with the possibility of another 2. That's $6 million invested in a marginalized community that all recognize has been underrepresented, underinvested for more than 30 years. So I'm here to tell you that today, for me, this is a dream. I started this dream almost 7 years ago. And I didn't even know what modular housing meant. And I called the guy, I read a research report, I called a guy in New York and asked him would he be interested. And he said, I got enough business on the East Coast to keep me for the next 50 years. Where is Minnesota? So that's kind of where he, but it's thanks to the Carlson School of Management, we got it passed. But this work is not done by Bill English alone. One of my executive committee members here is Jill Stevens-Island. Raise your hand, Jill. She's here, former principal at one of the large consulting firms, I can't remember the name. At 88, you sometimes forget names. But one of the large, she was a former principal there, but she's been with the NJCT since its conception. And she is stuck with us when she could have left early, as so many other people did. But we have over 40 members who made this happen. The NJCT is more than Bill English. I'm just the face of it. But this project that Devin George is invested in, a young man who grew up in North Minneapolis, a young man whose mother worked at the first planet control data that I brought to North Minneapolis more than 30 years ago. Senator Champion's mother worked there. His mother worked there. So many others, our architect mother worked at that plant. And they created a middle-class neighborhood of African-American people, over 200 jobs for more than 20 years. And so we have a chance now to reinvest in the new North Minneapolis. Thanks to Councilmember Ellison and Vital, this is going on, this has their support. And I want to tell you, we're going to be hiring people from there. But it's going to be more than just people from there. It's going to be people from all over this city who needs jobs. We can't possibly, you talked about 133 the first year and a half. By the time we get to the third year, we expect to have over 300 people hired at jobs starting at more than $30 an hour. All of us who say this, I'm appreciated. I believe this is divine intervention. I don't care where you are spiritually. I know where I am. And the city didn't even know about this building. Nobody in the city. I remember Tabitha Fisher from the city said, Bill, how did you find the building? Thanks to Jamil Ford. We found the building, the Rawson and the Selman family reached out and they believed in this project that they held up from leasing it to someone else who had more money. So I want to thank the Selman family for that. And so finally, I will say this, there would be no NJCT without Reverend Jerry McAfee. When Mark Dayton came to North Minneapolis to seek votes when he was running for governor, he asked Jerry at our church, what can I do if I'm elected? Jerry said, hold a job summit in North Minneapolis. He did that. He created the Urban Initiatives Board, and then out of that came the NJCT. So I want to finish by saying thank you, Pastor, for having this happen. I want everybody to know in this room, it would not have happened without a good CPED staff. I want to thank Andrea Brennan, Eric Hansen, Tabitha Fisher, and the whole group over there, because they've been more than helpful. They got a PhD in being user-friendly. You can't say that about the state of Minnesota. You can't say that about the county. They have the ability to be user-friendly, and I so appreciate it. Thank you all, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Mr. English. Mr. Solomon, I think Mr. English has spoken well for all of you, so I'm going to ask you to be brief.
I will be very brief.
And I'd ask the clerk to start the timer. I would never cut off Mr. English. Mr. McAfee would come take my mic if I did that, so I won't do that, but I'm asking you to be brief.
As he should. I've only got a few things to say. First, I'd like to thank Mr. English for his leadership in all this and remind everyone that he didn't just bring that semiconductor plant to Minneapolis. He brought those plants to dozens of cities across the country. And Mr. Lockwood, who's sitting on the other side of Devin George, has brought these modular plants to many cities. So we've got a great team here. The only thing I know is what I've learned from being on that site day in and day out since my dad and I first renovated it in 2005. The best thing for that neighborhood is having as many people as possible employed, proud of their employment, making good money, because that makes it safer, it makes it more vibrant, it makes it a place that you want to be. We were empty for the first couple of years, then we moved Target in, and then Target expanded again, and eventually when they had 350, 400 people working there, it was a great neighborhood to be in every day, Monday through Friday, not just when the farmer's market was open on the weekends. I think this is going to be even better. And I'm really looking forward to all the people that we can make a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll see if there's anyone else here who would like to speak. Mr. McAfee?
Thank you.
I was afraid I might have to cut you off. Thank you for being here, for your whole team. I am going to call on Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep my statements brief, but I do want to just commend Bill English on not only your leadership on this project, but the amount of credit that you gave to every single person who was a part of this. So often people come up and don't always give that breadth of credit, including thanking city staff who work incredibly hard. Obviously, these things are community driven, right? These projects do not happen without community. They do not happen without your innovation, and they do not happen without the project team. But knowing that the city has a PhD in being user-friendly, as you put it, and that they're improving that system and they're improving that every single day, we know it's good for our staff to hear. It's one thing when it comes from us, but when it comes from a project team that they've helped put some real, stake in the ground, that goes so much further. So I want to thank you for that. I want to thank everybody. There's like a who's who in the room of like innovators and business folks and labor. So I want to thank you guys all for being here. It's incredible to see you supporting this project. I'm really excited to see Northside residents employed here, making housing, affordable housing. It's huge. We're doing two things at once here. So thank you. And with that, Madam Chair, I will move approval of this item.
Approval has been moved of item number 2. Further comments or questions? Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank you, Mr. English. I see Mr. McConnell here, Reverend, and Mr. George. Thank you for investing in the North Side and in the city of Minneapolis. And Mr. English, you are so correct. Jobs are very, very important. You cannot underestimate the dignity that comes with a well-paying job, and Mr. George is going to provide that. So thank you all for coming down today to show your support, and thanks for the great union backing and to help get this project off the road. I'll be voting yes.
Are there further comments or questions? Seeing none, I just want to also add my thanks to everyone who's in the room, most especially our staff who have been dealing with trying to get us further for a long period of time, including Mr. Hansen's team under Ms. Brennan's leadership and Ms. Moses, who had the opportunity to stand up today and share this piece of the puzzle, because there are many pieces of this puzzle, and it is greatly appreciated. I think in many ways city staff saved us from ourselves, and so we have done what we can do in order to be supportive, and we really appreciate everyone's collaboration. And I want to thank Councilmember Ellison for, as always, being really good to work with on economic development in his ward. He knows what he's doing, and he is very supportive of projects in his ward, and I'm really proud of seeing council members be more active on economic development. Seeing no further comments or questions, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. Thank you for being here today. We'll move on to item number 3, which is the moratorium on certain high-impact industrial uses. And I'd ask okay, great. I didn't know if Meg was going to speak, or you were. That's great. Thank you for being here today.
Chair Goodman and committee members, Andrew Friends, CPED Planning. The moratorium that's in front of you today is to address some changes that are happening in the zoning code with the land use rezoning study. As we'll discuss later this afternoon, there are a number of uses, primarily high polluting uses that are permitted under the current code that are proposed to be banned under the land use rezoning study. At Councilmember Ellison's request, we put together this moratorium to prevent those uses which are proposed to be banned under the new code from establishing during this interim period prior to the effective date of the new ordinance. And I'm happy to answer any questions on it.
Thank you for being here today, Mr. Friends. Are there any questions with regard to item number 3? Seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing on item number 3, which is the passage of an ordinance with regard to a moratorium on certain high-packed industrial uses. I have 2 people who are here to speak. Mr. Mulholland, correct?
Yes,
Welcome.
Mr. Mulholland. Evan Mulholland here, attorney with Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. I understand that this has already been adopted essentially by announcement, so I'll be very brief. But I just want to say that we and the coalition we're a part of with community members for environmental justice are very much in support of this interim ordinance. We thank city attorney and staff and council for putting this together. And we should make this permanent. We should make no expansion of legal non-conforming uses allowed in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McConnell, welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, council members. All I see as I was here, I couldn't help myself but talk on this issue as well. Obviously, oftentimes are here advocating for jobs, and obviously nobody wants to live in a city that's polluted. But hopefully we'll end up with a policy that allows people to look at each project case by case for the totality of the project and the impacts and the benefits as well. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak to this issue? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really excited to be moving this forward. Want to thank staff for, as a council member, we're not experts on we rely on the subject matter experts to really help us bridge that gap between what we know and what we don't know, sort of your instincts as a community servant with all this technical stuff that can be hard to parse through. I feel like I've gotten a real huge education on this stuff, and I'm happy to be moving this forward. I want to thank Mr. Mulholland for all of his advocacy, and I know he's part of a broader coalition that's been advocating on this stuff as well. And so happy to move approval of this item, and just want to thank all of the community members and our city staff who have helped me understand this issue a lot better.
On Councilmember Ellison's motion to approve, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That item is approved. We'll now move to our quasi-judicial public hearings. We have one quasi-judicial today. That is a variance appeal by Michael Margolis on behalf of Armory Holdings. And I would invite Alyssa Brandt to come up and give her report. Ms. Brandt, welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, members of the committee. As noted, this is an appeal of the decision of the Zoning Board of Adjustment related to a variance application to reduce the required glazing in the pedestrian-oriented overlay district from the required 40% to 30.8%. This variance is being requested in order to legalize windows that have been removed without a permit. The site in question is 2910 Hennepin Avenue, part of the Uptown Theater redevelopment project. It's located on the southwest corner of Hennepin Avenue and Lagoon with a future land use designation of destination mixed use. Hennepin and Lagoon are goods and services corridors, as well as Lake Street, which is one block to the south. The windows, as noted, fall below the required 40% in the pedestrian-oriented overlay district. The requirement is proposed to remain in effect should the City Council keep in that portion of the land use rezoning study, which will be heard a little bit later on this afternoon. So this is intended to be a requirement that remains in the code. Overall glazing variances are not permitted except when they are part of overlay standards such as the application before you. The current facade does meet the 30% required for all facades not in the PO, but it does not meet the pedestrian-oriented overlay standard. With regards to the variance findings, staff and the Board of Adjustment found that no practical difficulties in complying with the ordinance exist on the site. The building was constructed in 1918 with nearly 100% glazing. The removed windows were proposed to be retained and in some cases even expanded in the initial approval for the renovation of the space. They are separated from the viewing area as well by walls and stairways, and so do not affect visibility inside the space. If I could get the document camera to show on the screens, please. We can see here, zoomed in, highlighted in yellow are the windows that were removed, and the highlight in blue are walls, which separate the proposed glazing from the balance of the space. Staff and the Board of Adjustment found that the application is not in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance or of the comprehensive plan. The intent is not only to provide views in and out of buildings, but also to improve the pedestrian experience by limiting blank walls and creating more architectural interest. The comprehensive plan specifically calls out renovation of existing developments as being required to conform to this standard. Staff and the Board of Adjustment found that this does not meet the essential character of the area. As you all know, Uptown is a substantial commercial hub for retail, dining, and entertainment. The existing building stock in the area has considerable ground floor glazing. Staff and the Board of Adjustment found that this proposal is not detrimental to health, safety, or welfare. Staff recommends that the committee deny the appeal, upholding the decision of the Board of Adjustment.
Questions for staff on item number 4? Seeing none, thank you so much for your report. We'll open up the public hearing on item number 4 and ask the applicant to step forward. You are generally entitled to about 10 minutes. If you can keep it at that or less, we would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair Goodman, members of the committee. My name is Michael Margulies. I'm with Newton Res LLC, and I'm here on behalf of Armory Holdings LLC. Armory owns the Uptown Theater and is the long-term lessee of the part of the Lagaros building, which is adjacent to the Uptown Theater. And these two buildings are being combined for the purpose of creating an entertainment venue and hopefully in the purpose of revitalizing the Uptown neighborhood. I'm going to take about 7 minutes to tell you why I think this variance should be approved. The reason we're here before you today is because we have a conflict between two policies. Both are good, but I think we have to figure out which one is going to be the overarching one. So the first policy in place, as you know, is the fact that in a pedestrian overlay district, 40% of the first floor area has to be windows, has to be glazed. And this building in the underlying zoning only has to have 30%, and this would qualify. The 40% ordinance is to ensure that the building presents an active use to the pedestrian experience. Staff report relies upon the comprehensive plan policy 6 that says we should have pedestrian-oriented design, calls for windows that allow clear views in and out of building. This is the so-called eyes on the street policy. And in this instance, the first floor of the Lagaros building achieves the 30%, doesn't quite make the 40%. But if you look at the two buildings together, and they are combined in terms of use and appearance and function, and so the whole purpose of going forward, the combined glazed area far exceeds the 40% threshold. So in essence, we achieve the results that policy 6 is trying to get us. We're asking for a variance because the nature of the buildings would result, a hardship would result if the ordinance were applied here. Part of the area in which the city would like to have us put windows is the actual performance and viewing space. So if we have windows with light coming into it, it would create a hardship in terms of being able to produce and view productions. Moreover, even if we achieve technical compliance with this requirement by putting in more windows, the policy still wouldn't be achieved because in order to abate the window light, we'd have to put up black curtains, we'd have to put up some opaque measure so that you couldn't have the eyes of the street going in. In addition, the other area where the city would like us to put windows is, quite frankly, where a staircase goes from the first to the second floor. So if we had a window opening up on that area, all the eyes of the street could see is the staircase going up. So technically, we could comply with the policy, but we wouldn't provide the real result the policy seeks. So we have a conflict of policy goals, and I told you what the first one is, and the second one is policy 8 out of the comprehensive plan guide. And I think that's a little bit more important in this case. It asks us to repurpose existing buildings. It asks us to reuse them. It asks us to redevelop existing buildings and not tear them down so that we can revitalize neighborhoods and so we can make neighborhoods safer. The Uptown neighborhood is struggling at the moment. The default by the movie theater operator really impacted this neighborhood. And the neighborhood isn't anywhere as vibrant as we want it to be, nor where it can be, and it's simply not as safe. The owner of the theater has come up with a plan that I think repurposes the building properly. But when you take the repurposing of this old building and one that's historic, and for a specific use like this, sometimes accommodations have to be made. So you have to work with the building that you have. So very quickly, the 3 requirements for a variance, does it create a hardship? Yes, and it's a hardship that's not been created by the owner. And the hardship is simply that we can't use the building as intended. Second, the variance needs to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and the city policies. Here we have the 2 conflicting policies. In fact, the building satisfies the eyes on the street objective, singularly and in combination with the Uptown Theater building. Creating windows looking in at a closed staircase or into a dark performance space does nothing to advance the policy goal. There will be nothing for the public to observe. Similarly, the project as a whole, combined with the Uptown Theater, creates a facade that satisfies the eyes on the street, creates that synergy and energy that you want, satisfying the overall intent of Policy 6. Now, one of the policies that was noted in the staff report is to create safe neighborhoods. Installing these unneeded windows actually has increased the opportunities for vandalism instead of reducing them. During the renovation process, the applicant installed a lot of windows, and we found that sometimes within days or even hours, those windows were destroyed. The denial of the variance is inconsistent with the overarching goal of encouraging renovation of existing projects and revitalizing the neighborhood. Given the historic nature of the Uptown Theater, the building has to remain, but I think we figured out a way to properly repurpose and in turn help revitalize the neighborhood, creating more pedestrian activity, which in turn makes the neighborhood safer and continuing that positive loop. So the primary goal and conclusion of Policy 6 and 8 isn't to create windows, it's to create a safer neighborhood. And I think that we achieve that in a more revitalized neighborhood. If we agree that this is a unique and important use, then we should also acknowledge that some minor flexibility is needed in order to achieve that use. The final requirement is that nothing that we do is injurious to the neighborhood, and I don't think there's any question that this variance poses any risk to the neighborhood. In converse, what it does is gives this neighborhood a chance to come back and be as strong as it once was. I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We don't do Q&A on this kind of thing, but we do appreciate you being here today. We'll see if there's anyone else here to speak to this issue. Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. The Uptown Theater is located in the ward that I represent, but it is shared with Councilmember Chugtai. I did have an opportunity to speak with Councilmember Chugtai earlier today. I am going to move to grant the appeal. I'd like to ask the staff to consider the following findings. The use of this building as a music venue presents a practical difficulty in and of itself because of the light intruding on events, the building in one location, as well as this awkward stairwell, which is not really what our intent was for previous uses. Because the historic portion of the theater can't be modified, and it itself exceeds the maximum window requirement, meaning that the other portion is what had to be modified anyway. That's why the windows are covered in the location that they are, with the unfortunate situation with the stairway. So that would be the second finding, is that the historic portion of the theater can't be modified itself. And lastly, staff found no significant issues with regard to potentially granting an appeal. So I would move to grant the appeal and direct staff to consider those findings. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment? Councilmember Chugtai?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm excited to support this, to support your motion, and think this is the best way for us to move forward in our longer-term efforts of revitalizing the Uptown community.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That item has been approved, the appeal has been approved. We'll then move on to our discussion item, which is discussion item number 16. And I understand Ms. Geisler is going to be giving the report. I will just note Mr. Port is not able to be here today as a result of a death in his family, and we wish his family well during this very difficult time. Ms. Geisler, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members, and I'm Amy Geisler. I'm the manager of the residential finance team. And we are here today, and as you mentioned, Alfred would normally be with us if he was available. We're here today to share an update to our Way Home report, which is an annual report we do on the housing team to share outcomes of our various housing programs, and it's the primary way that we share those outcomes. So our housing program tools include long-standing, very successful programs like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and Minneapolis Homes, as well as newer programs and initiatives, and we'll be talking about those a little bit later. So again, this annual report is a format that we've used over the past couple of years, but we are exploring kind of maybe different kinds of formats going forward. And we'll go ahead and get started. So our first slide, just to remind everyone, what are our housing values that drive our strategies, priorities, and our programs? And they are listed here on the screen: advance racial equity, expand opportunity, prevent displacement, prioritize resources, and develop sustainably. These housing values are informed by the various policy documents that inform our housing programs in the city, including the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, the Strategic Racial Equity Action Plan, the city's work with the Anti-Displacement Policy Network, and other policy documents that guide our programs. And these housing values inform our strategies, which are listed here on the next slide. So we have 7 key housing strategies in the Way Home report, and we're going to walk through each of these and just give you a couple of examples of each one, kind of our progress in each of these areas. So the first strategy, increasing housing supply diversity and affordability in all neighborhoods of the city. This is a strategy that is really driven in large part by the update, the 2040 Comprehensive Plan update. And other new built form regulations and the land use rezoning policies, which are later on the agenda. So one project that closed in 2022 that is a great example of implementation of this strategy is MPHA's Family Expansion Project, which has 84 deeply affordable large family units in a scattered site development throughout the city. So these are 4 to 6 unit apartment buildings that were constructed on either vacant lots or lots that had obsolete and dilapidated single family or duplex properties on them. It's a very successful kind of densification strategy and a really successful example of developing new affordable housing, very deeply affordable in parts of the city where we haven't seen as much activity. So we wanted to highlight that as kind of an example of progress under strategy 1. Other examples include the zoning code updates in 2021 to allow more shared housing and single room occupancy or SRO type housing. And then also the adoption of the inclusionary zoning ordinance, and the annual report on our inclusionary zoning program will be coming forward at the next BIZ meeting. So strategy 2, this strategy is all about production and preservation of affordable rental housing in the city, and really it's being driven by our largest programs, which are the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, our low-income housing tax credit program, and inclusionary zoning. And increased city investment in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in particular is resulting in a very significant increase in production, which I'll just walk you briefly through this chart here. So starting on the left, the bar you see there is what our average annual unit closings on affordable rental units was between 2011 and 2018. You can see during that time frame we were averaging 322 units. And the different color on the bar, the blue on the bottom refers to units that are affordable at 30% AMI. The orange is 31 to 50, and then the gray on top is 51 to 60. So that's the bar on the left. The next bar over, the one with 349 on top, is our Met Council goal. So all cities in the metro area that participate in the Met Council's Livable Communities program receive an allocation of affordable housing need in the city. And so the goal that Met Council has assigned us is 349 units, again with those affordability breakouts that you see. And then the next bar over is our average annual unit closings between 2019 and 2021. You can see in that 3-year period, we were doing 634 units a year, quite a bit more over our earlier production and over the Met Council goal. And then that last bar on the right shows the units that we closed in 2022, which was 919 units. Very large number, the most we've ever done on our team. Helps us understand why we all felt so busy in 2022 when we see that bar chart. But you'll see there, not only is it a very large overall number, but the number of 30% AMI units that we produced is about 6.5 times what we were doing between 2011 and 2018. So we did a lot of new production in 2022. We also did preservation work, and the largest of those was financing that we closed on to install critical life safety sprinkler systems in 952 public housing units in partnership with MPHA, some of our deepest affordability that we have in the city. And then, in addition to just general production, we also incentivize homeless units in particular through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And in 2022, we produced 115 units that are dedicated specifically to people experiencing homelessness, which is another very large amount compared to past years of production. And we're going to touch on homelessness a little bit more in our Strategy 6. So moving ahead to Strategy 3, this next one is all about preserving unsubsidized, naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAH. This is another area of our housing program where we've seen a lot of success. The city, we launched our NOAH preservation strategy in 2018. It includes a mix of property tax incentives and acquisition financing designed to prevent displacement of low-income tenants. And we do that across 3 programs. Our NOAH Preservation Fund, which provides acquisition financing, our 4D Affordable Housing Incentive Fund program, which provides those property tax benefits, and then our small and medium multifamily loan program. So in 2021, kind of towards the end, you may recall, we approved some updates to the NOAH Preservation Fund program guidelines to encourage participation by new and emerging developers in that program, and that has been very successful. In 2022, we closed on 6 NOAH acquisitions to preserve 96 units. All 6 of those projects were led by new and emerging developers, and 5 of the 6 self-identify as BIPOC. 4D program has also been very successful. Since 2018, we've preserved over 2,000 units, NOAH units, and over 500 buildings across the city, again, across all wards of the city. So that's another program where we've seen success in parts of the city where we haven't seen as much in the past. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Roxanne to share our next strategy.
Ms. Kimball, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much, Chair Goodman, members of the committee. I'm Roxanne Young-Kimball. I'm the manager of Residential Real Estate Development Services. And I'm going to speak a little bit about Strategy 4. Through the Minneapolis Homes program, the city provides a suite of products that aim to help residents access, create, and sustain affordable homeownership. In 2020, the city made a significant shift in its homeownership investment strategy to better center Black, Indigenous, people of color renters in our program design and meaningfully impact our goal of serving 13,000 BIPOC renters by 2040 to eliminate the racial disparities in homeownership present in 2020. Some of our key highlights to help people access homeownership: the city was an early investor in Build Wealth Minnesota's 9,000 equity program. Our $500,000 contribution was leveraged to create a $10 million first mortgage lending pool focused on Black renters. Since its launch in 2021, 9,000 Equities has served 487 homebuyers regionally, and 86 were Black homebuyers in Minneapolis. We've continued support of our homebuyer education and the Homeownership Opportunity Minneapolis Down Payment Assistance Program. And new in 2021, we funded stabilization programs. All of these programs provide homebuyers with the support needed to purchase a home anywhere in the city of Minneapolis, which is key to a citywide homeownership strategy. To create new homeownership units, we funded over 90 units a year through our Minneapolis Homes Financing Program, which is triple our pre-2020 production rate. 2/3 of the units created are perpetually affordable through a shared equity homeownership model. Over half serve households below 60% of area median income, and more projects are multi-unit than single-family homes. Pictured here is the groundbreaking of Harrison Townhomes, a 17-unit perpetually affordable housing development by Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity that's serving homebuyers between 41 to 60% of area median income. A portion of our staff team is also included in this picture. To sustain homeownership, we launched a new direct payment assistance program for homeowners impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and assisted 141 homeowners with keeping their homes. We also launched changes to our home improvement programs midway through 2022. In 6 months, we processed 245 intakes and closed on 19 loans. Across all of these homeownership strategies, our rate of service is over 75% to Black, Indigenous, and people of color households whose income range is typically between 30 to 60% of area median income. Next, I'd like to introduce Joey Dobson, our Housing Policy Coordinator, to speak to Strategy 5.
Ms. Dobson, welcome.
Thanks, Roxanne. Good afternoon, Chair Goodman and council members. Joey Dobson, Housing and Equitable Development Policy Coordinator in CPED. So Strategy 5 is to support renters living in Minneapolis. As you all know, Minneapolis is a majority renter city with approximately 53% of Minneapolis households renting their homes. The city has many policies and programs in place that are intended to support renters. The report we're presenting today covers initiatives that CPED takes the lead on. It's important to acknowledge and appreciate, though, the vast amount of critical work led by the Department of Regulatory Services, the Department of Health, Department of Civil Rights, and others that also support renters in Minneapolis in their areas. A key strategy that is housed within CPED on this front is the city's support for legal services for renters. The city supports local legal services organizations to provide help to renters in need. In 2021, the city passed a right to counsel ordinance establishing city support to ensure that low-income renters have access to legal representation in eviction court cases. The city designated Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid as the service provider to fulfill this commitment from the city. In 2022, over 200 families were represented in eviction cases because of the city's partnership with Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid and the Volunteer Lawyers Network. Also in 2022, over 200 families received legal services for help with repair or health and safety issues in their rental homes. In addition, the city supports Homeline's legal advice hotline to provide Minneapolis renters with information about their rights and legal options. In 2022, over 4,500 renter households in Minneapolis were served through Homeline's work, and that constitutes over 10,000 residents who are part of those households. Finally, the city also supports the Tenant Resource Center, which is a collaborative across Hennepin County to provide access and information about resources to renters in need. There's a virtual website component as well as a phone component. Over 6,000 visits. There have been over 6,000 visits to their virtual Tenant Resource Center in the last year. So just to conclude with this, support for legal services is one of the many ways that the city supports renters through its various policies and programs. And I will turn it back to Roxanne.
CPED continues its coordination efforts with Hennepin County and the city's Regulatory Services Department to address homelessness. A more detailed strategy was outlined in the City and County Homelessness Response Strategy Report, which was presented to Council on April 12, 2022. Through that collaboration and joint powers agreement, the City and County have invested over $200 million in housing and homelessness response. A key highlight was converting 6 shelter programs, or 320 beds, from night in, night out to 24/7 operations. We've also continued support for Stable Homes, Stable Schools, which partners with 19 Minneapolis public elementary schools. Since 2019, we have served 1,440 families and 4,082 children with rental assistance or supportive services. CPED manages city-owned property that's suitable for development, including managing the acquisition, disposition, and lease of property. Working in close collaboration with planning and zoning to encourage denser missing middle development of city property. We also closely collaborate with the Minneapolis Health Department to lease CPED development property as community gardens. 2022 outcomes are highlighted on this slide. And pictured is the 2022 groundbreaking for 628 East Franklin, the longest vacant building in Minneapolis that is being rehabilitated as 7 perpetually affordable homeownership units. The event was an important opportunity to highlight our partnership with HUD and was attended by HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge along with federal and city representatives. Due to city efforts to ease the process of purchasing city-owned land that started in 2018, over half of the developers building homes on city-owned land are led by people of color, a third are led by women, and a quarter are led by community, meaning that low and moderate income residents are directly building or leading the organization that are building homes. Thank you very much to the City Council and Mayor Fry for your support of affordable housing in Minneapolis. A stable home is the foundation from which people thrive, and the need for investment is great. With that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kimball, Ms. Dobbs, Ms. Geisler, for all of your hard work. It's quite impressive to see everything in one spot. I also appreciate that you were willing to take the time to come to committee today and give us a sense of it, because I think everyone has a sense of what we're doing, but they don't see the entirety of all of the work of people in your department. I'll ask if there are any comments or questions from members of the committee. Councilmember Rainville, followed by Councilmember Osman.
I too want to thank all the staff for all the hard work, and this report is great. I look forward to writing my newsletter this week, because I will highlight all this information we've provided. As Councilmember Goodman said, to have it all in one place is truly astounding. I don't think there's a city in the United States of America that spends more money in their time on helping people with homes here. So thank you very much for helping.
Councilmember Osman.
Thank you so much for that presentation and great work. I'm happy that we're moving forward. And as 628 was mentioned, it was a vacant and sitting there for a long time. We do have a public-owned, city-owned parcels that are similar to 628. And especially in Ward 6 district, this 628, I'm glad it came, that it's finally getting built, it will be owned. But why did it take that long? Also, how do we prioritize this city-owned empty lots? And what is the public engagement? What is the community partnership or business partnership or developers partnership? Engaging in those things. One of the conversations that I had with the staff and the CBED leadership is that there's a lot of pushback when it comes to my district. And one of the things I hear is that, this is not a priority to us. And it is kind of frustrating for me to, I understand that we have very important work that we're doing, but how do we prioritize those kind of work? I represent a district that that's not getting much attention. 628 is a wonderful thing to highlight for me, but I want to know, how do we prioritize, and also why did 628 took this long?
I'm happy to speak to that a little bit. Councilmember Osman, Chair Goodman. 628 East Franklin was subject to multiple city RFPs. It certainly wasn't through lack of effort that property was a vacant building for as long as it was. The city, there's actually a lovely timeline that Hope Communities and City of Lakes Community Land Trust have put together that walks through some of the history connected to that parcel that I can provide to you. The city has RFP'd that property multiple times. We've actually purchased it multiple times because of developers not being able to perform. And this final opportunity was made possible in part because of the ARPA investments that came through with the American Rescue Plan Act. For prioritizing lots, generally speaking, one of the challenges that we have in marketing our property is larger development sites require some significant staff capacity in order to manage the RFP process and work in partnership with our planning and zoning staff and with community in order to put an RFP together. In the case of our Minneapolis Homes projects that are less dense, that are 1 to 20 unit, we've done that work comprehensively in partnership with the planning and zoning staff, and we do regularly market the 1 to 20 unit parcels. We have constraints based on the amount of funding that we receive, and then also based on what developers are able to make work as feasible proposals. And I'd be happy to follow up with you about specific parcels that you might have questions about in Ward 6.
Yes, just one follow-up question. I understand the staff capacity is always difficult and prioritizing, I understand it that way. But some of the partials that I had a conversation with the leadership is that we have partials that have been empty for 19 years. Example, Daniel Hall, who has been sitting there collecting dust that's creating problem in the community. And if the doctor can answer this, is that 2 years ago, I talked to the leadership and I was told that there's not a staff capacity for that, and it's been collecting dust for 19 years. And I just want to make sure that that I represent this district, and I'm their spokesperson. And residents are feeling like staff prioritize, outside their district. I don't agree with that. I think staff is doing a phenomenal job, but it's kind of also questionable when you have a location that has burned down for 19 years ago that's still sitting there, and when you talk to the leadership, says that we don't have staff time.
Ms. Brennan?
Sure. Chair Goodman, Councilmember Osman. What I could say is that I don't have the number off the top of my head. We can certainly get that for you and the rest of the committee members. But yes, CPED is responsible for managing hundreds of lots throughout the city of Minneapolis. Actually, Councilmember Ellison and Councilmember Vita probably have the most empty vacant lots in their wards, more so than we have in Ward 6. We absolutely would love to be working on all of those hundreds of lots, but we frankly do not have the staff capacity, nor has the city appropriated the financial resources necessary to fully develop all of these lots right now. So we certainly, the work that we put into getting the 628 Franklin development, for example, staff could have proposed that kind of development on any of our vacant lots throughout the entire city, and we dedicated probably more time to getting that vacant building, back into production with key community partners. And that's another key element here, is that when there are really strong community partners, like there were in the case of 628 Franklin with Hope Community and the Land Trust, it makes it a lot easier. But as Ms. Young-Kimball said earlier, without the huge influx of federal funds that we got through the American Rescue Plan Act, we would not have had the resources either to move that project into active production right now. So again, we're happy to provide a report on the vacant parcels that we have throughout the city. During the foreclosure crisis, the city used federal funds to acquire a lot of properties. We also acquired a lot of properties in the aftermath of the tornado that went through North Minneapolis, and so we do have a very large inventory of properties. The other thing I would add is that we went through a process around our disposition policy and heard, the council approved a policy that prioritized vacant properties that are designated for housing, prioritize those being for long-term affordability and deeper affordability. And so again, if the council wants to move to a different process where we just sort of make properties available to anybody who wants to pay fair market value for them, we could look at a different process than trying to get the most public benefit and maximizing the city's goals. That is one of the strategies that's identified in the Way Home report, and that is maximizing public land to meet cities' goals, including cities' housing goals around closing racial disparities in homeownership and around providing long-term, permanent, deeply affordable housing. And unfortunately, doing that work just takes a lot of time.
Any further questions?
Yep. No, just thank you. I think 19 years is too long, and I appreciate the work you guys put. There are community partners that are ready to work with the city, and maybe we will revisit and see what direction council can take to make sure that the neighbors that are the most needy are getting the priority in the city direction. Thank you.
Ms. Brennan, is there any priority on people who are not most needy? Perhaps you could answer that question, because I thought our whole thing is about prioritizing those who are most needy. It sounds like there might be a question about that, so maybe you could clarify.
Sure, Chair Goodman. Yes, our programs are both in homeownership as well as in the rental housing programs. You know, through the Way Home report, we talk about multiple programs, policies, investments that the city makes, and all of those programs do have prioritization that focuses on, again, longer-term, deeper affordability, and on addressing racial disparities, on preventing involuntary displacement. So our program, you know, staff makes recommendations for program and policy criteria that are intended to do that. So that is the goal. That is how the programs and investments are designed, and that is what we try to accomplish.
So, Ms. Brennan, if we wanted to move faster, we could do what the county does and just put these lots up for sale, and anyone who comes forward with the highest price could, or any price, could redevelop them, and that would work to make it quicker, correct?
Yes, Chair Goodman. Basically, the city has, you know, we are maintaining our existing portfolio of properties for the purpose of meeting city goals. And so if the goal was to just get vacant properties developed as quickly as possible, then we would be probably looking at a different set of strategies.
Okay, thanks. Does that help answer your questions, Councilmember Osman? So if you had a policy change you wanted to make, we could just say sell to whoever's willing to do something so that there wouldn't be boarded vacant buildings.
That, I appreciate that, but
Just wanna make sure you're
that's
not saying that.
That is not what I'm saying. I just think the 19 years is too long for a lot to collect the dust, and the staff should prioritize that, especially Daniel Hall. Thank you.
So perhaps with the Pigeon Building, I like to call it, since I've been around for every one of those 19 years, since there's already a timeline, we could have that in committee next month so we can see. I'm pretty sure I know of at least 5 developers who have been involved that we have paid to help us with this project, right?
I'm sorry, Chair Goodman, I'm not hearing the question.
The Franklin property that Councilmember Osman speaks of, that's been our nightmare for 19 years. We could have walked away from it and just let someone buy it and tear it down, right?
Correct, it could be torn down in a parking lot, for example.
Okay, okay, thank you. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to speak. I know that several of my colleagues sort of spoke to the housing portion. I did just want to commend staff for the amount of tenant protections, tenant assistance that we've engaged in over the last couple of years. I know that it's been a lot of work, and I feel like my day one, so to speak, on the council, we were doing things a lot differently, right? And that's not for better or for worse. I mean, you know, I think that we've improved, but it's not out of any sort of malice or anything like that. We just were doing things really differently when it came to tenant protections and the way that we serve tenants. And I will never forget talking to a lot of the inspectors in reg services, and they said, hey, look, if you want us to not be a hammer, you got to fund us differently. You got to give us different directions so that we're not a hammer. And to see reg services sort of steering into the kind of tenant advocacy role that they play, we've seen that time and time again and how that's played out. I feel like very early on, facing down the Mahmoud Khan situation. I know Roxanne Kimball was a big part of that. Reg Services played a huge part of that. And so just wanted to highlight, I just saw that was in the presentation, really want to appreciate staff's willingness to really get hands-on and change the way that we engage with tenants. Real quick, I just wanted to kind of acknowledge Councilmember Osman as well. You know, I think even though it is undeniable the amount of effort that staff has put in to make a lot of changes. You know, a lot of us represent communities where the amount of disinvestment that we're coming from is steep. The amount of disinvestment that they're coming from that they expect us to undo in a short amount of time is decades long, right? And so it's sort of our job to be kind of insatiable when it comes to progress and improvement, no matter how innovative and well staff is doing. And so I just wanted to be able to hold both, right? To say staff is doing an incredible job. We are changing the direction that we're going. We recognize that, but that also, it's okay for council members to say, hey, look, the depth of the problem that I'm dealing with is aggressive, and it's long and it's deep, and I really need your help to undo it. And so I think that there's room for both, and I just want to commend staff. I also want to commend Councilmember Osmond for being an advocate, because we were elected to do that. And so just wanted to be able to hold both those things, and thank you all for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison. I'm glad you mentioned that because I had the opportunity to meet with the mayor this morning about my budget priorities, and I bet everybody is in the process of doing that. And perhaps one of the solutions would be to give CPED, like 10 more people in economic development and 10 more people in housing. And then they'd have a lot more capacity to do a lot. And I haven't known anyone to bring forward an amendment that would address the fact that I think that the Economic Development Division has like 16 staff people total. And housing is probably about 30 or somewhere doing all of this work. So should we want them to do more, we should probably have more of them. We should also perhaps not pass as many legislative directions and staff changes to their current work because they can't get what they need to get done because we're constantly asking them to do more. So I'm happy to work with anyone on a budget amendment that would increase the staffing at CPED because that seems to be the biggest holdup right now is not having enough staff to do even more work. And anyone who wants to work with me on that is welcome to talk to me after the meeting.
I'm always here for those conversations. I appreciate it.
You are always here, that is true. Further comments or questions? I would guess that we would receive and file the report with a note of thanks to staff for all of the hard work. It's really great to see, and hopefully everyone will have the opportunity to put that out in their newsletters, the city-focused newsletters, yet this month. On the motion to receive and file, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item is approved. Then we will move on to item number 17, the land use rezoning policies as it pertains to the 2040 ordinance. I will say to begin, this has been a massive amount of work by a very small but mighty team of staff people in the planning department. I know this because I've spent at least 12 hours meeting with them myself. And they've probably put in 10 times that amount of time to get us to this point. I want to thank you in advance. I know you've been working on a timeline. It's not always easy or non-controversial work, and it's really great that you have this in front of us today, and it is my intent as the chair to get this taken care of today so that we don't have more variances and CUPs and zoning changes that will free up staff and planning to do some more proactive planning rather than having to constantly be dealing with land use changes that could have been resolved should this portion of the plan be approved. With that, Mr. Wittenberg, thank you for a whole career's worth of work doing this.
Thank you, Chair Goodman. We really appreciate that. And thank you, committee members, for having us today. I'm Jason Wittenberg, Planning Manager in CPED. We are really happy to bring forward the land use rezoning study for your consideration today. I'll be joined in today's presentation by Jeanette Whitmire, Joe Bernard, and Andrew Friends. The land use rezoning study is a really critical piece of the implementation of Minneapolis 2040. It will have the effect of eliminating the overt conflicts that we have been living with between our land use policies and our regulations. We've been bringing forward and you've been adopting incremental changes along the way to move us in the direction of alignment between our plan and our rules. But as Chair Goodman alluded to, we've been operating in a situation to some degree that has been a source of chaos in the development review process, that it's been a strain on staff resources, that has caused a lot of confusion, caused a lot of rezonings, a lot of appeals, and other applications that have resulted in unnecessary time and expense for those who are seeking to invest in our city in a way that is in alignment with our policy objectives. I'm really proud of the work that this team has done and the staff in both CPED and other departments who have been a critical part of this as well. Thank you to the partnership with the City Attorney's Office, who has also put a great deal of time into the land use rezoning study as well. The Mayor's Office as well. All of the committee members who have met with us and provided feedback and guidance along the way. Much appreciated. This is a summary of the presentation we're going to give for you today. Unless we stop for questions, I think we're looking at about a 20-minute, maybe up to 30-minute presentation for you. We're going to review a background of how we got to today, the timeline and process, a little bit more information about what the land use rezoning study is, a summary of key recommendations, as well as changes that have been made to the recommendations since we first released a draft for public comment and review back in January. And then again, we'll cover some key topics and go over some changes that we understand committee members would like to bring forward today. With that, I will hand it over to Joe Bernard.
Chair Goodman, committee members, I'm Joe Bernard, CPED Planning. We want to start off this presentation by going over a quick timeline of the events that have gotten us here. Prior to 2019, the city spent 3 years engaging with stakeholders on the future of Minneapolis as part of our comprehensive plan update process. The adoption of the city's comprehensive plan, which is listed here at the top of the slide, kickstarted a focus by staff on implementing the vision, goals, and policies found in the plan. Since then, the city has adopted an inclusionary housing ordinance. We've allowed 1 to 3 unit residential development in former single-family exclusive areas of the city, completed a citywide built form rezoning study, and eliminated minimum parking requirements. Staff has spent much of the last 2 years preparing this draft land use rezoning study for your consideration, which includes reorganizing the entire code, new primary zoning districts, a new use table, a new map, and new maps. This work has required both internal and external engagement and coordination, which recently culminated in a public review period, which we completed in March. Among other important policy direction in Minneapolis 2040, the plan includes parcel-specific guidance for the size of buildings, which we refer to as built form, and the types of uses that can be established on a given property, referred to as land use. Built form includes things like height, setbacks, FAR, and that work was completed in 2021. Land use covers the activities that are allowed to take place on a given property, determined by the primary zoning district that we are proposing to apply here today. As of right now, there are a number of conflicts, as Mr. Wittenberg mentioned, that exist between what our zoning code does or does not allow and what Minneapolis 2040 says should be allowed. This is a problem that state law requires us to remedy, and so this proposal in front of you today is intended to satisfy that requirement. What informs the recommendations before you are the vision goals and policies found in Minneapolis 2040. So during those 3 years where we conducted public outreach to shape the plan, we conducted over 150 meetings and received over 20,000 points of feedback. We looked to the policies in the plan, for example, shown here regarding banning the establishment of heavy polluters in the city as guidance for how recommendations are made in the project. So as we're doing our work, we're asking ourselves the questions here on this slide. Are we advancing the goals of the plan? Are we eliminating conflicts between policy and regulation? Are we making it easier for users to navigate the code? And we're considering what are the racial equity impacts of these decisions. With that, I will, I think, turn things back over to Mr. Wittenberg to cover some of our draft regulations.
As Mr. Bernard mentioned, this is an opportunity to overhaul the structure of the code, which really hasn't been done since 1999. best practices around zoning code and structure have changed during that time. One of the things that we're most excited about is the consolidation of uses into one table that are currently distributed through about 5 different tables throughout the code. And consistent with some of our best newer codes in peer cities, this use table won't include every use that we can imagine. It includes a list of use categories and then some specific uses. Those use categories refer to other parts of the code that describe the characteristics of those categories and give a number of examples of uses that fall within those categories. People will also get more information out of this use table compared to the use tables that have historically been in the zoning ordinance. For example, where you see a 10P, for example, that means that that particular use is limited to 10,000 square feet for that individual use, and it's a permitted use. There will be some uses will have an asterisk embedded in the table that will indicate that that use is required to be part of a mixed-use building that includes housing. And assuming we can work this out with the codifier, the colors within the use table will coordinate with the colors on the zoning map as well. The primary zoning districts very closely align with the future land use categories in Minneapolis 2040. There were some instances where some discretion had to be made and interpretation had to be made. For example, in the downtown, the downtown area covering many different contexts was largely under one future land use category, which we have created a little bit more nuance that aligns with, to some degree, built form boundaries, and that we think is a little bit more consistent with the intent of the plan. To get into some of the specific districts, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Widmeyer.
Good afternoon, Chair Goodman, committee members. I'm Janelle Widmeyer with CPID Planning. So getting into the new districts, 15 primary districts are proposed that are replacing the existing 23 primary zoning districts. The districts shown on this slide are the proposed residential districts. The urban neighborhood districts are intended to be primarily residential in nature, but also allow some institutional and public uses. There are 3 districts proposed for areas with the urban neighborhood future land use designation. With these districts, the built form designations did play a role in how they were mapped. This was done to ensure allowed uses are consistent with the scale allowed in the built form districts and to ensure consistency with some land use guidance found in the built form policies. Therefore, UN1 is mapped to align with the Interior 1 built form district and allows dwellings with up to 3 units. UN2 is mapped to align with the Interior 2 and Interior 3 built form districts. In addition to uses allowed in UN1, UN2 also allows dwellings with 4 or more units. And then UN3 is mapped to align with the remaining built form districts, and that allows some additional residential uses as well. The distinctions in built form policy and why the UN and UN2 districts are proposed this way will be covered in more detail in a later in the presentation. Moving on to the residential mixed-use districts, these are also intended to be primarily residential in nature. There are 3 proposed districts, and again, these are mapped to correspond with specific future land use guidance. RM1 is proposed to apply to properties that are designated urban neighborhood with the future land use that also front a goods and services corridor. RM2 is applied where the future land use is neighborhood office and services, and RM3 to the future land use that's public office and institutional outside of the downtown core. These districts are somewhat similar to the existing office residence districts and the types of uses that are allowed. Notably, commercial uses are allowed when they are part of a mixed-use building, and the RM3 district also allows larger institutional uses. The next slide contains the proposed commercial and industrial districts. Commercial mixed-use districts are intended to provide a range of goods and services and to promote employment opportunities. The 4 proposed commercial mixed-use districts each correspond with a future land use designation. So CM1 applies to neighborhood mixed use, CM2 to corridor mixed use, CM3 community mixed use, and then CM4 applies to destination mixed use. These districts allow a wide range of uses that include residential, but notably here in the CM3 and CM4 districts specifically, non-residential uses are required on the ground floor. Next are the downtown districts. These are intended to reflect the unique nature of downtown as a regional destination and a vibrant residential neighborhood. They allow the widest range of uses compared to other districts, and 2 districts are proposed. DT1 is applied where we primarily have public office and institutional downtown, and then DT2 is applied where the future land use is mixed use, destination mixed use rather. Something notable here is like with the CM4 district, the DT2 district requires commercial uses on the ground floor. Next are the production districts. These are intended to primarily create opportunities for employment-focused development and to accommodate production uses that are vital to functioning and growing city. And here again, we have 2 districts that are proposed. These are replacing the existing industrial districts. PR1 is applied where we have future land use guidance for production mixed use, and PR2 is applied where production and processing guidance applies. Some notable things about uses that are or not allowed in these districts. Residential uses are allowed in PR1 but not PR2. Likewise, only select commercial uses are allowed in PR2 to ensure these areas are available for production-focused uses. And lastly, the heaviest polluting uses are proposed to no longer be allowed in either of these districts. Then lastly, we have the transportation district, TR1. This is just largely applied to rail corridors and rail yards. With its limited location, the allowed uses are also very limited. And that is the last of the proposed districts. With the updates that are proposed to the zoning code, other city ordinances are requiring updates as well to reflect these changes. The other ordinances with the proposed updates are all shown on this slide. The updates are largely technical in nature, such as updating district names and section references. When needed, we worked with our partners in other departments to that implement these ordinances to make sure that the appropriate changes were made. And with that, I will be turning it over to Joe next.
We want to make sure that everyone is aware of the major points of public feedback that we received during the public review period. So that'll encompass the next few slides here. The first example we have is that we received a fair amount of comments requesting that the UN1 district be applied to areas where staff recommended UN2 zoning, which is something that Ms. Widmeyer covered a little bit a few slides ago. But as we want to cover this one again just to make sure we're all on the same page. The key difference between UN1 and UN2 in this case is that UN1 limits residential development to no more than 3 units, while UN2 allows 4+ unit development on larger lots. The decision about where to apply UN1 versus UN2 is determined by a Minneapolis 2040 policy language in the Interior 1 and Interior 2 built form districts. You'll see in the language here, Interior 2 clearly states that multifamily buildings with more than 3 units are permitted on larger lots. So to eliminate conflicts between our comprehensive plan and our zoning code as required by state law, these locations, they need to have a primary zoning district that allows up to 4, or allows 4+ unit development. Another issue that staff received feedback on was allowing small-scale commercial uses in the urban neighborhood districts. We've got the key policy language from urban neighborhood from Minneapolis 20 highlighted here. The only commercial uses that are intended to be allowed by Minneapolis 2040 in urban neighborhood areas are those uses, commercial uses that already exist. And the language goes on to state that expansion of those existing commercial activities beyond their existing properties is not encouraged. So This policy is, it's staff's position that this language does not support the establishment of new commercial uses in urban neighborhood areas. The next point of public feedback that we received is that we got a fair number of comments from folks highlighting the importance of food access as an issue that the land use rezoning study has some influence over. And indeed, Policy 63 from Minneapolis 2040 addresses this issue with a variety of potential action steps. You see one of those action steps highlighted here on the slide. Ms. Widmeyer will be coming back up here to cover some of the changes that we made as staff in response to the public comments on this issue. The next few slides, we're going to try and cover examples where staff made changes to the draft recommendations during the public review period. Sometimes these changes were made because of staff feedback, others were made in response to public feedback, and so their first example here is from comparing our January versus April drafts. In January, staff applied the RM1 zoning district to the proposed map to properties that had urban neighborhood future land use guidance, but that were along goods and services corridors. And we relied on this policy language here that references properties that are immediately adjacent to those corridors being appropriate for commercial activity. Initially, when we did this mapping, we used a process of grabbing a buffer from those streets to identify the properties, and the result is shown on these images here. On north-south corridors, this meant that just one parcel was included in that RM1 zoning, but on east-west corridors, sometimes many parcels were grabbed. So when we went back to the policy language and we reconsidered it, we decided in the April draft to interpret that language more literally. Properties immediately adjacent to goods and services corridors may be considered for commercial activity. So the resulting change here is that in the April draft on east-west corridors, we're just grabbing the parcels that front directly on the corridor. The next slide, we've got tobacco products shops and off-sale liquor uses. Due to the way in which the new commercial zoning districts were applied, the January draft expanded the area where both tobacco product shops and off-sale liquor stores could be established. During the public review period, we reconsidered this approach, and the areas where tobacco product shops are allowed was reduced in the recommendations that we presented in our April draft to the Planning Commission, and is reflected in the version you see in front of you today. And we did that to be more in line with where they are allowed today. This in part came from acknowledgement of all the work the city has done in the recent past to address concerns about tobacco product shops. Off-sale liquor stores are in a similar situation. However, staff did not make a change to where they are allowed during the public review period. The proposal in front of you shows an increase in areas where off-sale liquor stores are allowed. Some of those areas are highlighted on this slide here. The last item that I'm going to cover here as far as changes that we've made, we wanted to highlight a change in approach to zoning our parks, which the change was made largely as a result of feedback from park board staff, planning staff, and discussions with our city attorney's office. We initially recommended a specific zoning district for parks that would have limited the uses allowed on properties guided for parks in Minneapolis 2040 quite severely. However, concerns about regulatory takings and the ability of the park board to operate some of their non-park functions resulted in our recommended approach, which is applying zoning to match the adjacent future land use guidance from the maps. So parks remain a permitted use in all districts, and an additional list of uses allowed as accessory to parks were added to the April draft. And those, I think that covers all of the changes here in our approach to parks. I invite Ms. Widmeyer back up to cover the next few slides.
Thank you, Joe. The next two slides are related to increasing food access that we received in the public feedback. So generally, the staff recommendation was drafted to increase access to retail sales and services uses in a way that achieves the Minneapolis 2040 goal of complete neighborhoods. And grocery stores specifically stood out as a retail use in the public feedback as being essential to achieving plan goals. So in response to that public feedback, the staff recommendation was changed to increase the proposed maximum gross floor area of grocery stores in the RM1 and RM3 districts, as well as adding grocery stores as a permitted use in the PR2 district with a maximum floor area of 40,000 square feet. And that 40,000 maximum was also applied to the PR1 district. And on this slide, this is pertaining to allowing changes that allow year-round growing for community gardens. So these changes included amending the definition of greenhouse so that it accommodates deep winter grow houses, like the one shown on the top photo. Also allowing greenhouses as an accessory structure to community gardens, which is not currently allowed. And included with that were size allotments for those structures that are more generous than what would typically be allowed for accessory structures. And then lastly, a change was made to allow hoop houses to stay up longer when building permits are obtained. An example of a hoop house is in the bottom photo there. To discuss the next slide, I'll be turning it back over to Andrew Friends.
Good afternoon, Chair Goodman and committee members. One other area that we received significant public feedback on was the regulation of production and processing uses. Probably the largest area that we received feedback on and the biggest change to the regulation of production uses that came out of that is a change to the spacing requirement for those few high-impact production and processing uses that are proposed to still be allowed. We received significant feedback from a number of environmental organizations, as well as from quite a few individuals, that the spacing requirement as proposed in the January draft was insufficient. We significantly increased that spacing requirement up to a quarter mile, and we modified that spacing requirement, changed the structure a little bit so that we were spacing not only from where residential uses, schools, and child care centers are today, but everywhere that a new residential use, school or child care center could be established in the future. We also made some changes to some specific uses, forge and foundry, metal plating, recycling, and commercial laundry. Those changes were primarily data-driven based on conversations with the health department and our public works staff in solid waste and recycling to make sure that we are regulating these impactful uses as best as we can. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jason.
We understand that some committee members have motions that they'd like to bring forward for changes to the ordinance. Chair Goodman, with your permission, I'd be happy to run through the summary of those.
So I feel like people are glazing over, and this is a long meeting, so I would urge you to go through the staff chair's amendments quickly. We can vote on those, then we can take the 4 amendments brought by members of the committee, we can vote on those, and we can move on. I find it totally fascinating, right? So I'm kind of weird and geeky, but I can get a sense of the room, too.
Thank you, Chair Goodman. I will move through these relatively quickly. The first amendment that we are aware of would restrict the areas where a new liquor store, off-sale liquor store could be established. As Mr. Bernard mentioned, the draft regulations had substantially expanded the zoning districts where that use could be established. We've had discussions since then that have resulted in a recommendation that would be probably a slight contraction compared to the current situation. Motion number 2 actually comes from a recommendation out of the City Planning Commission. Mr. Friends noted that as part of the restriction of higher impact polluting production uses, that there was prohibition on forge and foundry uses. One of our planning commissioners noted that that would unduly affect some arts-related uses, including making a use that fabricates art, public art for the city. I would make them non-conforming. So a planning commissioner worked with us to make a motion that made several changes that would allow art studios and arts education uses to have a very small-scale forge and foundry use as part of their activity. Motion number 3 it also comes out of the City Planning Commission. The Planning Commission recommended that in those districts where staff was recommending a maximum size of grocery stores of less than 20,000 square feet, that number would be bumped up to 20,000 square feet. There would remain districts that have a limit greater than that, and some districts that have no limit on the particular size of an individual grocery store. Numbers 4 and 5 are simply something that staff forgot to include in the draft, and that was an effective date of July 1st. We've worked with our city attorney's office to suggest a date that makes it clear to everyone when these new rules take effect. And if you have some reason to get your use established before these new regulations, you have until that date to submit a complete application for a permit in order to take advantage of current rules if that's beneficial to a property owner in some way. Number 6 is a package of additional technical amendments, sections where we forgot to add a title, for example, or technical changes. There's a graphic where we forgot to change the fence height regulation within. You acted on a rezoning application earlier today that is included in that technical change, the one map amendment that we're recommending as part of a technical change to be consistent with the action that you're taking today on a property on 42nd Street. Motion number 7 would come from Councilmember Chavez to ban establishments where the primary activity is the sale of fur. Motion number 8, there was some discussion about unintended consequences around certain districts that require ground floor retail uses and what the impact would be on public safety and welfare facilities like a new fire station or police station, for example. We have drafted an amendment that would allow those public safety and welfare uses to fulfill the ground floor commercial requirement rather than requiring a separate retail use.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about this?
Chair Goodman, I think that concludes our presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I was just thinking from a process way how to handle this. Councilmember Osman, do you have a suggestion?
No, I have a question.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you so much for that presentation, and I met your staff in prior and discussed some of them. But Franklin, it's mixed-use area, my district. Some of the questions that my residents raised, that does the city council still get to review conditional use appeals? Can you talk about that? What is the effect in this process, in this proposed conditional use appeals?
Sure, Councilmember Osman, Chair Goodman. There are a number of uses that currently require a conditional use permit that are heavily regulated by our licensing team. Some of those uses we're proposing would remain conditional. Some would be moved to permitted. In those situations where they are recommended to be permitted, it's staff's view that the conditional use permit offers very little value or benefit for a 2-month process that also has significant expense, and that the real meaningful regulation and enforcement action takes place on those uses, such as off-sale liquor, through our licensing ordinance and licensing staff, rather than through the zoning code. And conditional use permit, I think part of your question also was the process for those. A conditional use permit, the City Planning Commission has the final action on a conditional use permit, subject to someone filing an appeal of their decision within 10 days of them acting on that use.
Okay, I know that you're not part of the licensing, but does the licensing department have a public hearing process? Or I know I know they notified the 300 feet, whatever resident.
It depends on what the use is. So do you have a specific thing folks are worried about?
Yeah. My next. Have you received any comments on? I've been getting comments on the sauna. The sauna, it's, I believe, permitted most of the districts, and people have concerns about the sauna being permitted in this everywhere in the city. If that is just safety concern or whatever concern it is, or environment, and has there any comment on that? And I know I don't have any amendments or anything like that. I don't plan to bring any, but if you can talk about that more.
Certainly, Councilmember Osman, the regulations around sauna have been updated in the recommendation that use has historically been classified as an adult use, a sexually oriented use. And there was some enforcement action around one particular use that got some attention recently. And I think there was a pretty strong consensus among those who regulate the use that it could become a permitted use. There's still work to be done with our licensing and public health staff around updating their ordinances as well, and to include, for example, ensuring that the sauna runs on electric heat rather than wood-burning heat, which was a source of complaints for a use that had been unlawfully established. So my understanding is that there is more work to be done on that use. I can't answer the question about the exact process that a license for a sauna would go through, and whether that involves a public hearing or would involve a public hearing.
We could talk about this after the meeting. I think the general gist of the problem is there's been a history of illegal saunas being used as covers for prostitution and sex trafficking. And then there's like the Finnish use of sauna, which is like a beautiful one in Councilmember Rainville's ward that I go to, Watershed, and the pop-up saunas at Malcolm Yards as an example, being a totally different thing. And so we kind of have to grapple with that as we grow and learn as a city. So we should probably talk about this afterwards. I don't know that we should call them all the same thing. But I appreciate you bringing it up. We can put it on our, what do they call it, parking lot of issues that we can talk about between now and the council meeting. Just so that those that have had problems with illegal sauna use that lead to sex trafficking don't accidentally become legal uses under the auspices of a Finnish sauna, which I think we're going to see more of, and hope we do. That's a good question. Thank you for bringing that up. Are there other questions before I move into this amendment? Okay, thank you. Mr. Wittenberg, you can stay right there. I'm going to move the main motion to get us going because I think we have to have something in front of us. And then move amendments 1 through 8, which are essentially staff amendments that, since my name is on them, I also agree to them. And so we'll start with those amendments. Are there any questions to about motion 1 through 8 in front of you in a packet with all of the detail behind it? Okay, seeing none on motions 1 through 8, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Those are approved. Then I'd like to start with the motion by Ellison, Chavez, and Shugtai that's an actual change to the study. It's not a legislative directive, it's a actual change. This is, I had talked to Councilmember Ellison about it, maybe staff have this, correct? And so perhaps you could just read the change you want to make, and I just want to get Mr. Wittenberg's reaction to it. Is it something staff is supportive of?
Chair Goodman, we don't have serious concerns about the proposed motion.
Okay, great. So maybe you could just read it out loud, sir?
Yes. And so this is amending section 525.420, which is related to the expansion or alteration of nonconforming uses. And so it mostly keeps the segment the same, except on item 3, you'll see in the middle of the page, the original reads, and the original text is still there, the enlargement, expansion, relocation, or intensification will not result in significant increases of adverse offsite impacts such as motor vehicle traffic, noise, dust, and odors. That pertains, and I'll let staff correct me if I'm wrong, to all nonconforming uses, regardless of what type of nonconforming use they are. And I wanted to add something that got at those high impact uses. And so we have the language here that is added. When the nonconforming use is a high impact production and processing use or a post-consumer waste producing use, expansion, relocation, or intensification will result in an appreciable decrease of adverse offsite impacts such as motor vehicle traffic, noise, dust, and odors. This language gets at that high impact production and is not sort of, my understanding, does not sort of bleed out into every single type of nonconforming use that might fall under that category. So that's, and it's really for us to make sure that, we know that a lot of these polluting uses, for example, are in communities that are experiencing environmental justice issues, climate justice issues. So we want to make sure that if folks are making any sort of changes to their property, that those changes address and minimize that adverse use. So that's the best way I could summarize it.
Okay, so Mr. Wittenberg, your team has talked to the council members and you feel good about this?
That's correct, Chair Goodman.
Okay, great. Councilmember Ellison, would you like to move your amendment?
Yes, I will move. Move this change as amended. Move the chapter as
Are
amended.
there further comments or questions about this amendment as authored by Ellison, Chavez, and Shugden? Okay, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That one has passed. Now we have 3 legislative directives. I'm a bit confused about this coming in the context of a legislative directive. These are ideas that would potentially require a comp plan amendment. Isn't that correct, Mr. Wittenberg?
That is correct, Chair Goodman.
And so essentially what we would be asking you to do is research what it would take to make these be a comp plan amendment. So I want to just check in with the authors to find out, you're not asking them to do a comp plan amendment by October 31st, are you?
No.
Councilmember Chavez.
I'm also withdrawing number 2, so the second one is not going to happen anymore.
I'm sorry, sweetie, they're not numbered.
Oh, sorry. I'll walk through it. These are just, it's a timeline that we worked with staff on, and it's basically gonna, I can walk through the first one maybe? And
Please.
Then okay.
Yes,
So the first one, I just want to thank staff for helping with this, writing this amendment. This is a legislative directive that will examine an amendment to the comp plan that would authorize neighborhoods serving commercial uses in areas guided for residential use. This effort would include a public engagement process, as well as potential regulatory changes that would implement any updates to a comp plan. And the goal with this is to make sure that when it comes to the council in the future for deliberation, that it would help residents utilize their neighborhood and increase the importance of the convenience of commercial districts, making sure that people can more easily walk and roll to their local establishments. So this is just a legislative directive. It would help us work with staff. It isn't changing any policy.
So it's asking to work with staff to discuss this further about a potential comp plan amendment. Not that a comp plan amendment would have to be done by the 31st. Correct?
That is my understanding. If staff has a different opinion on that, then yeah.
Chair Goodman, our intent would be to work with the mayor's office ultimately on the timeline on those amendments, but any timeline that's in those legislative directives, presumably that will be part of the discussion. I think that was that October of next year, if I'm not mistaken?
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm like, I won't be here. I'm not paying attention.
So that
to
helps.
2024. Okay, so sorry.
No,
so
we're good.
sorry. Okay, and you guys are good with that timeline?
Yes.
Okay, so given, is everyone understanding? I apparently was not. Of what's being suggested. Are there further comments or questions on what I will call amendment number 2? Because we already passed 1. All right, let's see, we did 1 through 8, so the last one was 9, so this would be 10. Okay, further comments or questions? Seeing none on that comp plan study situation. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is approved. Now, Councilmember Chavez, which would you like to, which is the last one?
This is the one that says Minneapolis 2040. So it's to examine the analysis of the interior and rear setbacks. I am dropping that amendment.
Okay.
I'm going to be working with staff on a separate occasion
Okay.
in the future.
And so the last one, which would be number 11, this is the environmental one. Is that correct? Councilmember Ellison, thank you for jumping in.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I can talk about this one. There was a lot of discussion from community members. There's a lot of discussion among staff around how we could, and I'll speak as a layperson here. I don't want to speak on behalf of staff. Get at what community members are calling cumulative impacts, how we could incorporate community feedback into potential uses, and how we could have a consideration of environmental justice issues in relation to that. And so this is really I think through that conversation, it was determined that it would be better for us to pursue policy that could help us do that, as opposed to trying to instill that into the zoning code somehow. And so this is for us to start moving on what I hope will eventually be code changes that will allow us to create some kind of environmental justice checklist or worksheet or assessment that we could then apply broadly to projects that could have adverse impacts on impacted communities. So that's the best description I can give of this. And I think that this has staff support. I think that this was also a similar thing was passed by the Planning Commission. I wanted to make sure that we ratified that idea here on the council and could move forward officially as a body as well. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison. Mr. Wittenberg.
Chair Goodman, as Councilmember Ellison noted, that language does align with what the City Planning Commission asked for as well. We've been working closely with our colleagues in public health who are definitely going to have to take a leadership role on this, and I think are excited to do so. They have the skill set that's better tailored to analyzing the types of information that is going to go into that type of review. But yes, there's support from CPED and the public health staff.
Fantastic. Are there further comments or questions then on this particular legislative directive by Ellison, Chavez, and Shugtai? Seeing none, all in favor?
Madam Chair, can I just clarify, just in case, I'm noticing that the date on Councilmember Ellison's motion is October 31st, 2023. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
I would like to keep it this year. This is for a policy change and not necessarily a comp plan amendment, and so I think that
Perfect.
I think the timeline, yeah.
Okay, great. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is approved. Are there any further amendments to the land use rezoning policies of Minneapolis 2040's ordinance? Okay, seeing none, I will just again thank Meg. Welcome to being the planning director. I think you and your team have done a really excellent job. And I guess that would be a lot coming from me, given the dismay and distress I was under for 2 years of my life when we passed the 2040 plan. And I really feel like staff listened to the public, the Planning Commission, the council members to get to this point. You have a great team of people. I've had the good fortune to meet with them many times, and I really feel like they understand what the vision is of the plan and how to get from here to there. I think the work has been really incredible, and the fact that there's this level of consensus by elected officials says you're on the right track. I didn't get everything I wanted. There were plenty of things that I was slapped on the hand and told you can't do this in this process, and I think other people potentially had a similar slap, but that's okay. I understand what's legal and what's not during this process, and I think everybody approached it from that point of view. And I really appreciate you educating me, as well as my constituents and everybody else, of what would be appropriate during this process and what would not, and I feel like we came to a really good place. So I am going to move the land use rezoning policies along with all of the amendments that have taken place today and see if anyone else would like to comment. If not, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is approved, and thank you all for your great work. We'll then move on to item number 9, which was on the consent agenda. This is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. What will be noticed in the NOFA, or the Notice of Funding Availability, and I'll ask Ms. Flack to come forward. All right, I can't help myself. I go by everybody's previous name. I'm so sorry.
okay.
Ms. Goldberg, that was.
You are
I'm tired.
allowed.
I'm
You are
tired.
allowed. It's a tough change for myself every now and again when you're in the office after having been here for so long.
It's been
so.
like 10 years, though, so no excuse. Thank
No,
you.
no worries at all. No worries at all. Thank you, Councilmember Goodman, Chair, members of the committee. Before you today is the 2023 updates to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Program and NOFA, which is our Notice of Funding Availability, which is also the RFP. That's been a new acronym for me to get used to, but so if you're not familiar, that is the RFP. It's called NOFA. There are a number of technical updates this year, as well as some changes we're proposing for the program. I'm just going to hit a few highlights since we've been here for a while. I know you have a staff report that outlines those. First, I'd like to highlight that we are adding new program goal language that specifically addresses priority for deeply affordable units at 30% AMI, units that are accessible to people experiencing homelessness and at risk of experiencing homelessness. We continue to prioritize units for large families that are 3 bedrooms and plus, and units that have rental assistance. The other big change we are proposing this year is the award amounts. There is a table in the staff report. Those are kind of hard to highlight, and it gets to be a lot of tongue twisters when you start going through all the AMIs. But essentially, we're proposing a $5,000 increase per unit that qualifies for trust fund awards. If you're a larger, deeper, affordable unit, those units are getting a $10,000 bump. And if your unit is designated homeless, it gets a $5,000 bump. The other big changes then are in the NOFA, and they are to the a couple scoring categories. Most notably in our large family category, we are reducing the AMI point level from 60% AMI to 50% AMI, incentivizing points be earned in that category if you're a large unit and at 50% AMI. We are increasing the number of 30% AMI units and project-based rental assistance units that are committed and required to actually receive those points. So right now there's a sliding scale there, and we are moving the numbers up to incentivize production in that category. And then in the homeless category, we are updating language there and also increasing points if you're including a higher number of homeless units. And those are the big highlights. I also understand there's a proposed amendment, and I'm not sure how you want me to go over that, if you'd like to have that highlighted, or, and I'd be happy to do that.
I'll ask the authors if they would like to highlight their own amendment. I will note that the nonprofit and for-profit developers that have traditionally been a part of this process and given the opportunity to comment were not asked to comment about this amendment. They don't know about it. I've been getting texts along the way from people saying, how come we weren't told about this in advance? And it seems as though the scoring changes have done exactly what the authors want to do. But this dramatic change seems to be something that we should not be doing without asking our partners who actually do the work on this housing to chime in. And I'm highly concerned about it. I'll also note that I was told that the staff support these changes, so perhaps you can clarify the position of the staff working on this.
Sure. So I will make a couple statements, knowing that we haven't gone over those amendments quite yet, but I would like to highlight that the direction staff received from the mayor's office was to evaluate recommendations for the trust fund that would further the production of 30% units without reducing overall production of affordable housing in the city. And after robust testing and analysis, which includes analyzing the financing structure and unit structure of projects that apply to the trust fund. We assess the various funding sources that are available for the volume of projects and the types of projects that apply, as well as we consider the challenges projects face at closing. We arrived at the recommendations before you today to increase the number of 30% in homeless units required to receive points. Staff's proposed changes also clarify the goals, as I mentioned earlier, to preserve 30% AMI units, also units for large families, homeless units, and units with rental assistance. As staff, we believe the production of 30% units will go up due to the recommendations that are being presented to you today to increase the number of 30% AMI and homeless units required to earn those points. The amendments deal with increasing the overall point structure, and increasing that overall point structure doesn't necessarily correlate to increased production numbers, because there are many factors that go into getting a project to construction besides just simply scoring high. In any case, staff would want more time, if we could have it, to analyze proposed scoring changes before making recommendations to ensure there are no unintended consequences to these amendments. I know there is one amendment for one of the categories that we are actually recommending a point increase in, and so there's another recommendation above that. I think that would be worth taking a look at in that category. So, you know, if it's possible, staff could evaluate those changes for the next program update, after which we'd also have the benefit of the changes we're recommending today to take into consideration. But we're happy to discuss that further.
Thank you. Councilmember Chavez.
Chair Goodman, I want to begin by thanking our staff for the recommendations they made to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I appreciate your time and effort going on to this. Councilmember Chuck Ty and I have 3 different motions that you all have in front of you, so I'll make a motion to move them all together as one package. Last year, 28% of our affordable housing units were of 30% AMI or below. 28%. And the bar graph that we just learned of today that staff presented, it shows that it was higher on average from 2019 to 2021. So it actually decreased last year. I fundamentally believe that we can be bolder and ensure that we are creating more of these opportunities to reduce homelessness in the city of Minneapolis. The motions in front of you are going to make changes to our pointing system, which is the right thing to do today. Projects that are dedicated to 30% AMI will increase from up to 15 points to up to 20 points. Projects that are rental use, that use rental use program assistance with vouchers would go from up to 15 points to 20 points. Projects for housing homeless individuals in this housing and homeless crisis that we have right now will go from up to 20 points to up to 25 points. And we will also establish youth in the equitable development criteria to address youth homelessness that we need to desperately address. I believe that housing is a fundamental human right, especially in this housing affordability crisis that we're in. We need to build more deeply affordable housing that will reduce homelessness. And these amendments will help us prioritize housing for some of the most disinvested community and vulnerable community members in the state of Minneapolis. And housing is a personal issue to me and why I ran for office. My family and I lost our home in Midtown Phillips neighborhood when I was just in high school. This happened even though they were juggling multiple jobs as immigrants in the city of Minneapolis. When you get kicked to the curb and you're left homeless because of the lack of government support, you know that you have the responsibility as an elected official to make changes in government. It's a scary situation to be in, and having a government that has your back is just as important. There's also many of my constituents that face homelessness every single day. I would say Ward 6 in particular, and then Ward 9 as well. This is also a big prevalent issue in Ward 5. We need to use every tool that we have in our toolbox. I believe that no one should be forced to live in horrible conditions and in units that they cannot afford. As I drive across Ward 9, I see encampments and community members who are asking us to step up. And I can't sit here today and not make any changes to this. This is the right step in the direction. These are 3 motions, and I would move for approval.
Further comments or questions? Okay, well, I would love to have this debate, because I actually think we should have the debate. Because the truth of the matter is, the city of Minneapolis does not build affordable housing. We don't. We're a funder and a financer of affordable housing. Who builds affordable housing are nonprofit CDCs and for-profits that are doing the work. Some of them are in the room today, but every other one is not. And we did not ask them whether or not this was workable to them. So the whole partnership about us asking our partners what they think what they need in order to be more productive is reflected in the staff recommendation. Since they had a public process, they reached out to the development sector and they asked them what changes need to be made. They are outlined in the report from staff. So these things, in a way, just feel a bit pulled out of the air. I don't even understand how you go from 5 points for something to 10 points for something. That's doubling the points. What's the effect of that, Councilmember Chavez? Can you explain to me, technically speaking, on your second motion, 1 to 5 vouchers, 5 points to 10 points, what that's going to do, how that's going to affect the scoring, what choices will be made, what trade-offs will be made? I mean, where did these numbers even come from?
Pretty simple, Chair Goodman. It's going to build more deeply affordable housing, hopefully, in the city of Minneapolis.
It's not.
With the priority of 30% AMI and people that are homeless.
Okay, Pollyanna, it's not. It is
And that can be
absolutely not
that can
going to
be-
make that difference, because you're not the one building it, and either are the people in this room, except for the Post Folks in Beacon, who are actually building it.
Councilmember Goodman,
So all you're doing is performatively telling us what you think makes the most sense, but not taking into consideration that the people who do this work have not even been asked. They're not sitting in this room.
I'm not being performative. I'm doing the right thing, and we can just take a vote at this point.
Mayor Fry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't realize what I walked into on this, but my primary purpose in coming here was to give a huge thank you to staff, both for the work that they've done on this Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as well as the work around the Way Home report. The work we are doing on housing, and specifically affordable housing, is nation leading. When we go around the country, people want to know what Minneapolis is doing in our zoning code. They want to know what we're doing with respect to not having single family exclusive zoning anymore. They want to see what we're doing with our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And they want to know what we're doing around deeply affordable low income housing that, by the way, we have been producing, and I'm sure the Way Home report cited this, at 6 times the amount that we previously were able to get done. 6 times the amount of deeply affordable, low-income housing. Nobody disputes that we need to be doing even more than that. But by taking recommendations from staff, by trusting the expertise of people that do the work on a daily basis, we have managed to increase that production 6-fold. That's not my opinion. Those are the numbers. I'm of the position that we should be not simply trusting our own opinion, but trusting experts that do this work every single day. We've got a huge opportunity here with the amount of money that could potentially be coming out of the state to the tune of $1 billion. We are going to continue to double down even further in the work of this affordable housing. But my purpose really in coming here was to say thank you. You all are experts. You all have been doing the work, and the numbers that we are getting on a per capita are at or near nation leading. We're proud of that, and we're proud of you, and I want to say thank you.
Councilmember Osman, so sorry, I did not see that.
No, you're fine. Let Mayor go. Well, thank you for that presentation. I think all of us are committed to creating affordable housing for the city of Minneapolis. That starts from the leadership, from the mayor, all the way to the staff. And we have been committing. It shows that, the evidence shows that. But I think what I understand is that Councilmember Chavez wants to create more opportunity and attract more organizations to build 30% MI, homeless folks, places that don't make profit, but actually this money, the way we give points, the way I understand is that if you meet certain points, then you get awarded. That's how I understand Affordable Housing Trust Fund works. So we're attracting more people to say, hey, come build this for the lowest of the residents. We have homeless problem in the city of Minneapolis. We have encampments problem. We have youth homelessness. We have folks that cannot afford 60% MI. We have folks that have different challenges. So attracting more and giving more points to 30% youth, homeless folks makes sense. And I believe that is where Councilmember Chavez is coming from. Thank you.
Councilmember Shugtai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really excited to be bringing these amendments forward, this motion forward with Councilmember Chavez, and wanted to just address a few different things that were brought up today. I understand very clearly. I know Councilmember Chavez understands really clearly that a point system does not result in what actually gets built. There are a lot of steps in between how we decide we give our awards and ground being broken on a project or a project being completed, residents moving in. I don't think anyone here, it was not the intent of authors to claim that was something that would result from this. What we are trying to do here is incentivize in the upstream solutions that this body has deliberated on over and over and over again, right? We talk about homelessness on this body a lot, and our approach as a city to issues around homelessness, specifically with youth homelessness, specifically with those who are transitioning into homelessness. And I think one of the things that we hear staff talk about in those moments is challenging us as policymakers to be thinking about and investing in upstream solutions. And that is absolutely the correct position for our professional staff to be challenging us to think about. It is our responsibility to think not just about what's right in front of us, but what we are investing in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years to address the crisis that we are living in. We are, in changing this point system, incentivizing investment in housing or in units built at 30% AMI and for youth transitioning out, for those transitioning out of homelessness, for youth. We are making an investment and incentivizing in some of those upstream solutions. In terms of an increase in the production of deeply affordable housing in the Way Home report that we talked about earlier, and the six-fold increase that we've seen in the production of deeply affordable housing, that's not just because of work that the city has done. That's as a result of work that the county has done in incentivizing the production of housing at 30% AMI. This amendment that you're looking at today is the city aligning our priorities with the county, aligning our priorities with the state, and saying that we are deeply committed to investing in building for those who need it the most and investing in these upstream solutions so we can start to see its impact in the coming years. Grateful for the discussion here today, and I hope that we are thinking beyond. We're thinking about how we're incentivizing the solutions we want to see in the coming years.
Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand the author's passion and the author's recognition of the housing crisis. What I don't understand is I didn't get a chance to see this. You didn't come into my office. You didn't explain this to me. I'm sitting on the committee with the two of you, and I guess my opinion doesn't count, but I do have some questions about what this does to other affordability units. So 50%, 60%, 8%. I don't know if the staff's in a position at this time. Is that a question that can be answered quickly, or? Or would that due to overall production of affordable housing by focusing more on one level?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilmember Rainville. So I guess my response would be we don't have that information at this point to know. We haven't done the analysis to know, what would this change mean in terms of impacting other levels of affordability. We haven't had a chance to do that. So as far as the proposals that staff brought forward in terms of our recommendations, increasing the number of 30%, units, increasing the number of homeless units, and increasing the points. We tested that against projects that have received affordable housing trust funds over the past couple of years to do a sensitivity analysis just to, get an understanding of what those impacts would be. But we haven't done that kind of work on the proposed amendment, and so we don't have a clear answer for you, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. And again, I hate to put you on the spot like this, but I haven't had the chance to talk to anyone else. What does this do with our relationship with the other developers that have been allowed to give their opinion on this or to respond to this? That doesn't seem like a very good partnership that we have.
Well, Madam Chair, Councilmember Rainville, I guess, that would be a concern from staff side as well. We also work very closely with the state, and Hennepin County was mentioned, on these projects, and we haven't had a chance to talk through these proposals with them. The proposed changes that I just listed, that are in the staff report, we had a specific dedicated meeting with Hennepin County staff to discuss those and got their support for those just because of our close working relationship with Hennepin County around homelessness to make sure that those benchmarks we were implementing made sense to them.
So I guess I would ask the authors, would you be willing to delay this cycle to give our staff a chance to reach out to the state and the county and the other developers?
Councilman Rainbow, I already moved this item. I think right now it's just discussion, and then we can vote.
Thank you for the answer. So you don't feel it's important to engage others in this?
I did not say that. I moved it. We're going to take a vote. And I think one more person's on the queue.
Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do remember, I think it was 2018, myself and then Councilmember Alondra Cano had some discussion around changes to the point system, and I believe that we made some changes. I don't off the top of my head remember what those were. Does staff remember what those changes were? I know it's a long time ago. I guess I just mention it just to say that I think that what we were trying to do at that time, we felt like we were wedged in between, essentially affordable housing not being prioritized for places like North Minneapolis and at the time, currently, Ward 9, which then Councilmember Cano represented, and we did run into some issues around, Holman and these other types of things, and I think that we were largely able to cut through those with some deliberation and discussion. I see that what Councilmember Chavez and Chuktai here really in the same vein of that conversation. I know that this exact point system hasn't been fully vetted, but do we really feel like this is a complete rewrite of the point system? Are these increases moderate? Are they extreme? They look moderate to me. I guess I'll put it that way. And so I guess wanted to see a response from staff on that.
Sure. Madam Chair, Councilmember Ellison, I really appreciate that characterization and really appreciate too the Councilmember Chavez for bringing forward an amendment that would help try to increase the production of deeply affordable housing at 30% AMI. We know that that's where the greatest need is, and we understand that. As Carrie mentioned before in her presentation, we've spent the last 6 months running through different scenarios, doing the sensitivity analysis, looking at our current policy, trying to figure out ways to improve it, meeting with folks like Beacon. Beacon has been a great partner in this work. We've met with them several times. We put this up for a 45-day public comment period. We meet with affordable housing advocates. We meet with developers of all kinds. As Amy mentioned, we meet with our funding partners because the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a gap funding program that doesn't do anything without other sources of funds. So other state funding, county funding, other funding. So this is extremely robust, the analysis that we do, and everything that we do does affect everything else in this. And so while the face of it does seem like maybe it could be helpful in advancing 30% AMI units, we can't at this point stand up here and tell you definitively that it would. We also cannot stand here and tell you definitively that there will not be unintended consequences. An example, one of the things that we spend a lot of time analyzing when we go through this process every single year is we analyze the relative priority for new production versus preservation, for example. They're both really high priorities of the city, and we know that they're both needed. And so I believe most of these changes would be very specific to new production. And so just on the face of it, we could ask, and we don't really like doing this, but yet here we are, trying to on the fly provide some comment on what is being done or what is being proposed. And I mean, I guess one of the concerns that I would have is that we have a lot of projects that really need serious city investment in the preservation. We do have projects that are coming forward like Little Earth, like Heritage Park, like MPHA preservation projects that we want to make sure that we're also prioritizing in this. And those are the kinds of considerations that we give when we are considering making changes to this. And so I absolutely 100% appreciate what the goal is of this amendment. And I think, we've been working really hard to advance that goal and to make policy recommendations that advance that goal. But I think you heard, I've consulted with the housing team who does this work every single day, and their very strong recommendation on this is that our recommendation is that we would do some analysis on this before it would be adopted, but it doesn't sound like we're going to have the opportunity to do that.
If I could just, Madam Chair, I think the only thing that I'm challenged by is that I'm inclined to support the Councilmember Chavez and Choctaw's motion today. I would welcome another cycle for us to consider it, but it doesn't seem advisable that we take another cycle. I feel like that's kind of the point where I feel wedged. It's kind of like, we want to get this out. We want to make sure that folks kind of know what the scoring criteria is going to be. We have award week coming up, I think. So if we did delay this another cycle, we're talking 3 weeks instead of 2. So I guess that's my, I guess there's not a question in that. It's just to say, I'm inclined to support this today. I do want to respect staff's concerns about what these changes would make and invite, not really sure what to do about that. We've got a timing issue. We don't want to delay this. We've got an amendment that maybe could require some analysis, but kind of has to be decided today, right?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Ellison, yes, thank you for the timing consideration. Again, we also consult with the key funding partners. Minnesota Housing, with $1 billion that they're getting from this legislative session, they are more important than ever in our coordination with them. So we wouldn't want to get off the timeline because it's going to be really important for us to we work really hard to leverage every state dollar we possibly can for projects in Minneapolis. And so that is why the timing is important to align. Our recommendation to you is that you move forward with our proposed recommended changes to the policy, which we believe are the changes that will best position the city to produce the most affordable housing and the most deeply affordable housing. We believe that that's what we're presenting to you today. Our recommendation is that we look at these proposed changes for next year. We're here every single year. And I think the challenge, and we would be willing, I won't be here, but I know I can speak for Alfred Port, our housing director, in saying that we would be willing to look at our timeline and meet with members of this committee much earlier in the process, when we can sit down and look at potential additional changes and build in the time to do the analysis so that we continue this positive trajectory that we've been on to every year after year after year increase the affordable housing production and increase the deeply affordable housing production. We believe the recommended action before you today will do that. We cannot say for certain that the amendments will.
Councilmember Ellison, you good? Councilmember Rainville?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Ellison, when you worked with Councilmember Cano back to adjust this before, was there a 45-day public comment period and you engaged all the developers?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you. So while I'm not going to vote in favor of this today, we need to be more transparent in our government. I agree with the author's suggestions, but there's so many other questions, and especially the people who do the work, so I'm going to abstain on this vote.
Passing this amendment is not going to increase the number of affordable housing units at 30%. It might actually not allow us to spend the money that we have, because ultimately 30% units require multiple other funding sources. The amount of 9% tax credits, which go into almost every 30% project, is limited by the federal government, and the bonds that come with it are also limited. So what we could end up doing is assigning these, changing the points dramatically, and there probably won't be enough applications to even use the money to meet the criteria, because building at 30% is a very difficult thing to do. It also takes an extended period of time. I'll note that there's a beacon project downtown that's been going on for the better part of 5 years, and there are others that are also taking 4 and 5 years. So we'll have money that we have available right now sitting in an account, not being used, because we won't have tax credits or bonds in order to match what's required. So it's good to say you want to do this, but practically speaking, this money is supposed to get out the door. Tax credit and bond projects need to be spent within 2 years. It will take longer than 2 years to spend money for 30% units. It's totally performative, because in the end, what's going to happen is we're not going to be able to use the money. And that would be a real shame. And so I'll be sitting on the other side of this dais, if I'm even in the building at all, to point out to you that when you made this decision, if it should be not vetoed by the mayor, that you will have not spent this money and not achieved the goal you wanted to, because it's practically impossible to get the support services as well as the tax credits and bonds in order to accelerate the number of 30% units that people wish we could do. Take a look at what's happening in St. Paul. I think you could have St. Paul, St. Louis Park, Golden Valley, Hopkins combined have not produced the kind of affordable housing that the city of Minneapolis has on its own. We have been a leader as the result of the work by our professional staff. There is no rhyme or reason to any of these numbers, and these numbers are going to skew the way that this is set up in the system, and we might not see enough projects. We certainly won't see enough support funding. We won't have enough tax credits or bonds. We won't have the money from the other agencies, and so our money could just be sitting there in the end. Ultimately, these are professional staff for a reason. They've been super successful. We've seen that today. The timing of this was ironic because there wasn't any discussion of any amendments. As the chair, I wasn't told about any amendments till this morning, and all the people doing this work were not told either, and they're not here in the room to be able to give feedback. So winning a vote today is not winning for building affordable housing. It's winning a political point, and I will be here to tell you I told you so in 2 years if this actually goes through. On Councilmember Chavez's motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. And, I'm sorry, and any abstentions?
Abstain.
And the ayes have it. Seeing no further business before us and without objection, we will call the meeting adjourned.
Correctly installed and maintained CO and smoke alarms can save lives. For information about fire safety, smoke detectors, and CO alarms, visit the City of Minneapolis website.